Welcome to the Migration Report, brought to you by the folks at the Up Duck Podcast, in partnership with the Wisconsin Waterfowl Association. Together, we'll bring you weekly bird activity reports from the various regions across the state of Wisconsin. Welcome back to the Migration Report. My name is Tyler Beaton. I'm going to guide you through this week's updates based on contributions from across the entire state of Wisconsin. And if this is your first report, here's how we've broken things down. So we are using Interstate 39 and Highway 10 as our divide lines, breaking the state into 4 distinct quadrants. So we have local contributors in each quadrant providing reports from across the state in those specific quadrants. And just a quick note, if you are interested in being a contributor, shoot us a message on any social media outlet where UpDuck is located, and we'll get the process started to get you going with that. Now, as for the reports themselves, right, this first full week in October brought us cooler temperatures, clear skies, and a few signs that, hey, guess what? The migration season, it's starting to stir, but for the most part, across the entire state, we're still waiting for a real push of fresh birds. Now let's get into the specific regions. So we're going to start things off in the southeast region. So our cooler mornings and the clear skies that rolled in, right, it brought in cooler weather, but I would really describe it as more seasonal weather. And that came in pushing in the early part of the week last week. Did bring some bird movement, but overall, right, migration stayed modest, very, very modest. Woodies continue to be the predominant species observed. Hunters were starting to see more mallards. We had a few widgeons show up as well in small numbers, a few pintail, and then some teal were spotted early on, but they seemed to thin out as the week went along. Geese were becoming more and more consistent. So they were flocking up in urban ponds, making their way to feed and cut cornfields as the harvest season continues. The southeast part of the state, right, lots of beans are being picked, right? The picking season is wrapping up. So continue to watch that and watch the shift in where the feeds are taking place for geese as the season progresses here. In the southeast part of the state now, water levels continue to drop across the region. That was a theme, definitely. What that meant was birds were concentrating on in some of those places with the best remaining water. From a pressure standpoint, midweek pressure was light. Weekend hunts on public marshes got real busy, as you might expect. Different reports of heavy calling, sky busting, lots of folks setting up close by, which is pretty much what you'd expect on a public place on a busy weekend. Overall, the southeast part of the state looks like we're holding mostly local birds there. Maybe a few new arrivals, growing goose activity. So be curious to see over the next week. Weather looks pretty consistent, how much that changes. Now, let's move on. Let's move up to the Northwest. So before we do that, though, the Northeast, we didn't have any submitted reports for the Northeast. All of our contributors were traveling or out of the state or whatever it might be. So no Northeastern Wisconsin report this week. We'll have one next week for sure. The Northwest part of the state, though. So another week or another report where we had clear and calm week, cool mornings, light winds, and for the most part, the birds that appear to be around are local mallards. Their pattern on familiar water. They don't seem to be in a hurry to leave. There were a few small flocks of teal that were observed early, and then our first raft of coots started to show up, which is always a good sign that the diver migration, right? We're getting closer to that. So we did have hunters report seeing a few ringnecks, an occasional bluebill, and are having a redhead mixed in as well. Geese high, heading out to feed in the fresh cut fields. Not as many geese in the northwest part of the state as had been observed in the prior few weeks, which is interesting. Pressure was moderate, according to our reports, especially on larger bodies of water that are easy to access. Those folks who hiked into smaller or overlooked spots seem to find better success. Right, water levels continue to drop, which did concentrate those birds. Made some traditional spots harder to hunt, but if you found good water that was a little harder to access, a little bit smaller, folks in the northwest part of the state seem to find success there. All right. Last up here is the southwest portion of the state. Again, mild weather, more seasonal weather. I mean, it's just more on par with what you'd expect, really across the entire state of Wisconsin for the first part of October. Bird activity steady, but mostly local birds again here in this part of the state as well. Wood ducks, again, the most common bird. Mallards were observed starting to flock up, groups of 15 to 20. Those observed were believed to be resident groups that were gathering up and not new migrants that had made their way in. From a goose standpoint, geese, right? A lot of geese in the southwest part of the state, especially around those freshly harvested fields. Right, they're lifting off the lakes, right? The park ponds. Every morning to go feed in the newest freshly cut cornfield, especially as the soybean harvest in the southwest part of the state seemed to be almost wrapped up where our contributors were at, and the corn harvest was starting to pick up, which should really set the stage nicely here as we get fresh birds in. Now, hunting pressure itself was again light during the week, especially on the smaller bodies of water, on your Mississippi River pools, right, on your weekend hunts, as always. Right, lots of pressure, lots of hunters, lots of pressure. That's pretty regular there. On your smaller ponds, their water levels were down as well. Right, so you might have had some exposed mud flats. It might have cut down on the cover there as well for our folks, and possibly for you as well. If you are in the southwest part of the state. Overall, across the state of Wisconsin, we had a few themes this week. So we had local ducks, right? Lots of local ducks that were holding strong. Lots of woodies and mallards. Those are the two predominant species that were observed. And of course, tons of geese around. Lots of reports of water levels being low pretty much across the entire state. So we'll keep an eye on those things here over the next week. We'll keep an eye on the weather. And then we will be back next week for another episode. Thank you so much for tuning in. Be sure that you hit subscribe wherever you consume your podcasts. And we'll be back again. We'll bring you the report from this past week.